Hey, Chloe, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today, Grant.
All right. Well, man, it's a pleasure to have you and an honor to have you because not only just because you're an incredible athlete and the things you've done as an athlete, I can't wait to share that whole journey with my listeners, but you're also a mental performance coach. So we're gonna tap into sports psychology, mindset, and all sorts of different dynamics that we deal with as coaches. So I'm really excited to have you on my show today.
I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, as I always say on every show, that mental toughness is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I love starting my show and setting the tone with mental toughness. So, when you think about being mentally tough or just mental toughness, like what does mental toughness mean to you?
I'm so happy we're opening with this question because I think it's very much transformed for me over the years. Uh, if I look back to when I was an athlete myself, I would have said grit. If I said 10 years ago, I would have just been grit, like get
Yeah.
through it. And now, as a mental performance coach, I would say flexibility and adaptability is mental toughness to me.
Wow. Now, that's beautiful. And you know what, man, I say this all the time on my show, but we all know what mental toughness is, and we know like we have our own meaning, but no one has really said that over the last 200 episodes. There's always something completely different or a little bit different. And that's why I love asking that, because it's an obvious, especially in athletics, you got to be mentally tough. Well, what does that mean to you? Well, like adaptability and flexibility. I haven't really heard that. I mean, I know that, but it's beautiful. So when you think about your whole career as an athlete, even as a mental performance coach, can you share a specific time where you had to be mentally tough, where you had to roll up your sleeves and grit it out?
Yeah. So when I look back on my athletic career, I think that grit and discipline is what got me to the next level, but it wasn't sustainable. And that's why I changed my answer to flexibility and adaptability. So
Yeah.
it was very good for a short period of time, but it wasn't sustainable in any capacity. So I think and what I look back at is I look at my training logs from when I was, in high school and college, and it's just like, wow, I was going out there in -8-degree weather and doing hill repeats, and I was
Wow.
really, really getting pain cave in my memory bank and knowing what that felt like. So I was prepared for battle no matter what.
I love it. I love it. But is there like that one race, that one moment where you were like you just dug in, you had to be mentally tough?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to having that memory bank of I got this. And I
Mhm.
remember being on the starting line of state championship and being next to the main competitor I had in my state and thinking, oh, she was definitely not, because I played 3 sports. So I played basketball in the winter. So I would have to do my runs to get ready for spring
Wow.
track. I would run before school at like 5 a.m. And I'm from New Hampshire. So it's like dark, no one's out, like there's no one in a very small population, -17 degrees. I'll never forget, I came back with frostbite one morning, but I remember on the starting line bringing that memory up and when it was like a warm spring day, state championship, and I was like, she was not out there and I was.
Yeah. Man, that just gave me goosebumps, because that's like when you truly like, when I'm sure you've heard this, doing all the hard work in the dark so you can shine in the light. There
Yeah.
it is. That's
Mhm.
that's what I'm talking about. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about competitive spirit or just competing, because I think that, to me, I mean, obviously when we compete in our sport, the foundation is like, because we love it, we have fun, it's joyful, right? But we earn the right to like compete, and there's just something like, man, when we're competing, for me, it's just like it's unreal. Like I'm like, this is it's competing. So you
Mhm.
playing 3 sports and also competing at the Division 1 level, Duke University. Where did this competitive spirit, like, if could you go back to like the moment where you realized you started being competitive?
Yeah. So I have 3 brothers, and
Oh,
I think I always had a chip on my shoulder. I was like, I'm going to prove to my dad that I'm just as good an athlete as my brothers. I may be the girl, but I'm going to show out and I'm going to get a scholarship. And so that was, I think, where it was where it formed at a young age. And then it kind of became my identity, truthfully. Like everyone knew if we were at a pool party and there was a ping pong table, I wasn't going to leave the ping pong table. And if I lost, like I was going to be I was competitive Chloe. It was like a huge part of how everyone knew me. And it served me really well to get to the next level. But again, I'd say it wasn't sustainable in a lot of ways. And when I got to Duke, I wasn't able to, I didn't realize that I was going to have to keep up that competitive energy at such a high level all the time. It's impossible to be on all the time, as we're realizing in society now when we have devices and all these things. Like you can't be on all the time, otherwise you won't show up as your best self.
Right. So how did you deal with that? Because I felt that with me. I got to a point where, I played football for 13 years and I felt like for the most part, each year was good. My last year was the worst. Like it sucked that I left the game of football on my shittiest year. But I kind of made up a story. Like I wasn't having fun. I'm like, I don't want to compete all the time. I don't want to be on. I don't want to be the quarterback all the time. I just started putting all this pressure. And so I didn't deal with it the right way, whatever that means. But I could have done it differently. How do you deal with that? Like, or how did you deal with that when you're constantly like, you've been competing 3 sports, now you're at Division I, now you got to step it up. Like, how do you keep those levels at a healthy rate?
Well, truthfully, I didn't. I broke. I couldn't handle it. I was so used to winning in every area of my life. And then to get to a place like Duke where everyone's smart and everyone's fast, I wasn't prepared to handle it. And that's how I got into mental performance coaching, because I wish I had the tools to understand and reflect. And now, looking back, I'm like, wow, I really missed a fantastic opportunity. Competing is a privilege. And when I got to Duke, I didn't see it that way. I was burned out. I broke.
And so what did you do though when you broke? Like, how did you recover from that?
I remember being in the gym cross training because I got 3 stress fractures and I'd never been injured before. And then I just constantly was getting hurt with these stress fractures, and it didn't really make sense. But I think it was my body saying, Chloe, you're stressed. Stop doing what you're doing. You can't put this much pressure on yourself 24/7. But I remember being on the bike and in the pool. So we do aqua jogging. I don't know. And it's miserable. Like, and at that point I would like put my iPod shuffle in a plastic bag so I could like listen to music and be in the pool. And I have to be in the pool for like, or I got to be in the pool for like an hour and a half to make up for all the land that I wasn't running on. But I remember thinking like, Chloe, you're going through this for a reason right now. And like, you don't see it.
Yeah.
But this is preparing you for something like great, because I didn't get the experience of being on the team because I was constantly cross training by myself or with the other teammates that were injured, but it was not the experience that I was hoping for. But I was right. Like where I'm at now, and I wouldn't change anything. And it sounds so corny. I've never said that before, but it's true. Like it really prepared me to be able to support athletes the way I do now.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think, through all the things I went through for years, it sucked going through it. It really did. But I got through it. And now I look back, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I went through that shit. Cause now I got a story to tell, but it's more about the story. It's about how you can learn from it.
Yeah. And I think the key, and we know this, is just not giving up. And the fact that I feel so courageous that I just kept running. Like I never stopped training, and I never stopped trying to figure out this relationship between my mind and my body. And I just kept working through it. And I think that's really what sets people apart in the mental performance field. Like when working with athletes, it's the people who doesn't give up.
Right. And I will say this because you brought up training. I know you still train, and we're going to have everybody look at all your social media, but I'm going to throw it in right now. If you want to see someone who is just relentless with training, go check out Chloe's page on IG. I mean, when I was looking at it, I'm like, man, yeah, you don't quit.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I think it is transforming though, and being adaptable during these times when, I didn't have a gym to go to for a while. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, it's time to be a little bit more gentle with my body right now. And, but I'd say if I had one motto for the way I approach not only mental performance training, but my own physical training is quality over quantity,
totally.
period. And, I think you can't really go wrong there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing like, especially when you're training, having quality reps. Not just don't do a bunch of reps. I mean, you can, don't get me wrong. There's a time and place for that, but if you can do a bunch of them still with quality behind it, it's a nice marriage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we um, get into mental skills and kind of, and also transition, uh, right now in society, when it comes to sports, there's a huge focus and has been on specialization.
Mm.
And which is really nice to hear is that, I didn't specialize. I was kind of like you. I played 3 sports. I played tons of sports when I was younger, but you were in a different generation than I am, and you played 3 sports. So what was it about cross country and track that kind of pulled you to dedicate more time and get a scholarship? Or was there other sports that you were connected to, but you just didn't get that scholarship?
Yeah, definitely. I would have played basketball over any sport if I could have. I didn't have the confidence in basketball to play at a Division 1 level. And with running also, it's so straightforward. You run a time and you get in. There's no politics involved. There's no equipment. You just need a pair of shoes. You can do it anywhere. For me, it felt the most logical get out of my small town, get somewhere where I
Yeah,
had more opportunity.
got it. You know, Interesting that you're talking about running, and not dealing with, very singular, obviously, right? You're just running with yourself, but there's a lot of stuff that you don't deal with team sports,
Mhm.
and also the environments. But share with my listeners, because I think this is really it's a great question for runners, because it's just you and your mind, it's just
Mhm.
you and your breath, it's just you and your body. So when you're going and you've been going at it, do you have those mantras? Do you have those certain like go-to words that just so you can keep going? Or, and also do you let your mind wander a little bit as you're running and then bring it back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely had during like a 1500-meter race, something really gritty, an 800-meter race, I would have to have mantras that were like pain is weakness leaving the body. It was just, you're going in knowing that you're going to be in pain. And that's what I
Right.
talk to some of my athletes that are runners. They're going across the country for regionals. Like some of them have ACCs this weekend, and you're literally traveling to put yourself in pain, excruciating pain for like 2 minutes. Especially one of my athletes, she's an 800 runner, and it's just like, how do you prepare yourself for something like that? How do you get excited when you also know that there is pain involved? But I say that it prepared me for everything else in my life. Like nothing hurts the way a middle distance race hurts.
So you left, you were saying you had to get going through pain and got to get prepared
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. How to prepare athletes when they know, like with my middle distance runners, they're set, they know that they're traveling to a meet, they may be flying across the country, whatever it is, to go be in pain for 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is.
Right.
It's a different mindset you have to have. How do you turn that into excitement,
Exactly. That's huge. I've talked to athletes a lot, and there's some of them have like they don't know that they can be excited. Like they'll come up to me and they're like, "Man, I'm so nervous." I'm like, "Are you nervous? Or are you excited?" And they're like, "Wait, I can be excited." Yeah, man, you can.
Yes.
You can do it. You can think anything in this moment right now. You can come from fear. You can come from excitement, joy. You can honor all the reps that you've done, all your training. You can do that if you want to,
Yes.
or you can actually get sucked into all the negativity and the what ifs and the future and all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love being on this side of the chair when I'm working with athletes, just because it's just really cool to be exposed to different thinkings. And I don't know it all. I feel like I've experienced it all, but I haven't, but it's just really cool to be on that journey with these athletes.
100%.
Yeah. So I want to share that I want to let everybody know that, when you were in high school, you were named Gatorade New Hampshire Athlete of the Year. And that just sounds cool. And, for the rest of your life, you've got that, which I think is pretty cool. When you were named this Athlete of the Year, what did you feel like?
I think at that time I wasn't very connected with myself, truthfully, but that's kind of where I got all of my personal self-worth, was from these accolades. So that was definitely the biggest one. And I was, it felt great. It was like, here we go. This work is paying off. It's showing something, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know that like when you went to Duke is when you started to you transition into learning more about mental performance, and then, became a mental performance coach. But when you were in high school, were you exposed to mental skills?
Not in any way, shape, or form. And I will say too, so something I'm leaning into for my own practice is, I got my master's in clinical psychology, and I did that purposefully because there were resources for sports psych and mental performance. But from personally, my experience, that wasn't what I needed. I needed to be seen as not an athlete. And, we all go through this identity foreclosure. We're not athletes forever. And I think the earlier we can prepare for that and foster other parts of ourselves, the better we are. And we're more likely to show up as the best human we can be.
Big time. Considering you shared with me a little bit about, your experience at Duke, but how was your transition out of sport? Was it smooth? Did it take longer than expected? What kind of emotions did you have to deal with?
Yeah, I feel really lucky to be where I am now. It took a long time to negotiate that I was going to work with athletes, because like I said, I was going for clinical psych, so I could choose to work in pathological psychology and had other options. And I was asked myself the question, Chloe, are you just hanging on to this athlete identity? Why do you want to work with athletes? And then flipping the script on that and reframing and being like, no, this is exactly why you need to work with athletes, is because you didn't feel seen in any other way. And so the fact that I am now able to show up as a coach and see athletes as a whole human and not just as a player on a field, a runner on a track, that's my why. That's why I show up.
Man, it's awesome. Now, the identity piece, how long did you ever have to move away? And did you ever get to a point where you're like, I'm not an athlete anymore? Because I spent almost 2 decades in that space. And so now I'm 47 and I can say I'm an athlete still, finally. But did you how long did you live in that space, or did you, of not identifying being an athlete or wanting to be an athlete?
I think I still live in the space where I'm identify as an athlete. And that's part of the reason why I train the way I do now. And I sign up for competitions, I do CrossFit competitions. I do crazy ultra runs, and I'm still competitive. So, and I think part of the reason I do it is kind of testing my own mental skills and seeing if this stuff I'm talking about actually works, because the training's very different than it was when I was in high school and college. And it's much more quality over quantity, focused on mindset, not just burning myself to the ground with high mileage and going hard every day. It's a very intentional approach I take, and it's been working. So
Yeah. Well, I know that this is a general statement, but in high school, we're still trying to, high schoolers in general are dealing with hormones, they're dealing with their thoughts and emotions. They're still learning, right? And so when you think about back then, pressure, right? So your relationship with pressure then versus now, and when you think about what because you teach people how to deal with pressure, right? So how different was the way you dealt with pressure in high school, and now that you've gone through all these life experiences, now that you've got all this education, now you're teaching everybody, but you're still competing.
Mhm.
How different is your relationship with pressure now as an athlete than when you were in high school?
Great question. Night and day, but I think a lot of it also comes down to the lack of experience you have in high school. So everything,
Mm,
a boy not texting you back seems like the world's ending. And that's you. So all these moments seem like high pressure moments when in reality, when you step back and have perspective or have another 10 years on your life, you realize that, you know, it's just a moment and these moments are precious. Each moment is precious and you're able to show up in a better way because you understand that. So um I think that's where this wisdom, this love for the old wise is just, it doesn't get old because it's truly time is everything and having that experience.
right, right. You know, kind of going back, I don't know why I keep on going back to high school, but I think there's a lot of lessons there, right? It's a great platform. But going back to, like, since you weren't exposed to mental skills training, and I know that there's certain interventions and mental skills strategies are for certain things and certain times, but because you weren't exposed, if you could go back to your 15, 16, 17-year-old self, what do you think, like, what mental skill did you need back then?
Hmm, great question. I think I think it goes back, for me personally, it was less about mental skills and more about mental health and psychologically how I was looking at everything. Because it's kind of like, if I think about it, I was relying, like I said, I was relying on this grit. It's like me being a tennis player and relying just on my biceps to get the ball over the net instead of using my hips. Like I
Right.
could do it because I've got strong biceps. Like I'll get through it, but it's not sustainable. It's not going to last forever. I'm going to tear something eventually. And
Right.
that's kind of what I was doing in high school. I was just relying on my ability to be the most disciplined and the most competitive.
Mm,
But like I said, it wasn't sustainable. So I think I needed a reframe. I needed someone to guide me and give me some perspective that I didn't have.
got it. Well, when you think about, now that you're exposed to all these strategies and knowing how to teach them,
Mhm.
what's the one that you use, or it could be more than just one, but what are your go-tos for yourself when you're training?
I think visualization is the most powerful. You know,
Mm,
our mind
totally.
follows what we see. So I think if I could only hone in on one skill with athletes, it would always be that, and helping them get granular with it. A lot of times we just like, you know, because I did practice visualization before races. I would lay down and see myself winning.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was not, I didn't visualize how I felt, what I smelled, all these other things. And I think that's the missing link. That's where it gets powerful.
Yeah. Totally. And you know what? As I did the work, and I didn't know back in the day that, because my dad taught me to visualize when I was 10 years old. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And, but to know that your brain doesn't know the difference between a mental rep and a physical rep, right? I was like, and that's my selling point when I'm like working with athletes. I'm like, listen, when you're sitting there in line, I know people next to you are not visualizing. So you're getting 4 or 5 more reps before you get your physical rep in. And so for me, when I learn anything, whether it's my guitar, piano, or even when I'm working out, because I feel that my images are, because I've been doing it for such a long time, that I do everything in threes. So I see it first, then I do it. And then if I have to support that good rep or recorrect it, I just got 3 reps in one. And so I do that with my life. Like, it gets a little like, I'm not super anal about it, but like anytime I'm trying to perform it at something, I just do threes. That's what I call
Wow, I love that. It reminds me of the book. Well, it reminds me of a few things. In the study they did with free throws, where they did like
them. Yes.
one group did 100 free throws, one did 100 mental free throws, and one did 50-50.
Yeah.
And basically they came out to know that the mental free throws work just as well as practice as the physical ones. And I think that speaks for itself. It also reminds me of the book Talent Code, where they talk about, have you read it? But it's basically about intentional practice and how like a lot of times we go to practice for like 4 hours, but we're not completely present. And if you just spend 5 minutes being 100% focused and present and there, it can make the biggest difference.
Oh yeah, it does. And I forgot who shared this with me, and I use it a lot. I wish I could remember who or where I read it. But when it comes to visualizing your performance, there was a statement that I read, and it's be your own filmmaker. And so when I do that, even when I share it, people are like, "Oh man, that's great," and it is great because what you're creating in your head is going to come real if you do it enough times. But you can actually, you want to create a scene and you want to put like a soundtrack on it. You want to like create that environment, man, you get to do that. And it's like, and if you're a creative person, it's just a cool place to be.
Totally. And I think you're hitting a great point too. What's even more powerful with visualization is not even just seeing it through your lens, but also, so if you're a baseball player, throwing a perfect game and seeing how the crowd's reacting, what the ump looks like, what your coach looks like out there in the dugout, like things like that, really making it as clear as possible and being the filmmaker. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, since we are kind of diving into the mental side of our coaching, I love asking this question to all mental performance coaches and also sports psychologists. When you're working with an athlete, like what is it that just like rocks your frequency? Like when you're just sitting there with an athlete going, I love my job. Like, what is it?
Wow, there's a lot. Truthfully, sometimes I have to pinch myself because I love what I'm doing so much. I would say I really like working with the younger athletes because they're like a sponge, and everything you say, they really absorb and they take it in. And sometimes when you get to the higher levels, it's harder because they've already made it there. So that grit or that, it served them in some way, but sometimes it's not sustainable and it's harder to kind of change all those experiences and change mindsets. So I love when I'm with the younger athletes and I get texts that, I scored 28 points this game, I did this and it worked. And like them just like truly leaning into everything that we're talking about and committing to it and without fear. Whereas like when you get older, there's that fear of, they have hesitations. Is this going to work? But with the younger athletes, they'll just dive in and it's so beautiful.
I love it. I love it. So with where you're at in your career as a mental performance coach, like what is I know this sounds really funny or cliche, like what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? But like, whether if it's 5 or 10 years, like where do you want to take your career?
Yeah. So I've always had this vision of having centers in underserved communities to offer this kind of mental performance coaching, or I don't even know if it just somewhere where they can foster their mind too with sport. Because I think that's the issue that I'm running into now is I work with people that can afford to hire a mental performance coach, but I know how powerful of a tool it is and I want everyone to have access. So long term, I would love to be able to open some sort of health house where every part of every athlete was able to like flourish and grow and be valued and seen.
Yeah.
So that's very vague, but I see that for myself at some point.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you and I both know Grant Betchart, and we talked about this recently, but we were talking about when he started 17 years ago. It was kind of a weird thing. Like what is that? Like you want to talk to me about my feelings and like all that. So we were talking about how the field has changed so much, right? So we're at a point now like where we got so much awareness with mental skills and mental health, and so from you being in a different generation, and when you're in high school, you weren't exposed to it. It wasn't around. So from like high school and all the way up until now,
Mhm.
like how much change have you seen in the field? How much have you seen from your perspective?
Yeah. Truthfully, it still feels kind of uh what's that to me? But I'm also in New Hampshire right now, where I think I was in Los Angeles for 5 years and there would be less of that. But I think it's still hard to sell because it's not sexy in a lot of ways. You don't see your mind getting bigger, you don't, and,
Totally.
but I love something that really helps bring it home with higher level athletes is if, you put them in the locker room and you tell them, okay, think about your best game you've ever had in your life. Okay, and really let's like remember that. Let's go into all the feels, visualizing it. Okay, now think about your worst game. Really think about it. Okay, what was physically different about you? Probably not much. Probably not much.
Right.
So I love using that because it really highlights how important between the ears is. And it's just when I say that out loud to you, it's like, how are we not focusing on this more?
I know. I know. It's interesting because I think as a society, I think we're like, it's part of our vernacular now, like the mental game, it's, and also mental health, which I know that you're dealing a lot on the mental health side as well. But I feel that it's at a point where there's so many coaches out there, which is a great thing. I mean, that's a good sign. But why? Like you were saying, like going into these like, creating these houses of, to deal with, underprivileged kids and making sure they have these resources. But I'm at a point like, why doesn't every high school have, why not?
I agree.
And it doesn't have to be the high schools that or colleges that are privately held. It should be just part of the program, that there should be at least one mental performance coach for every institution.
I agree. I think that sounds fantastic. Maybe you're changing my 5-year plan right now.
You'll hire me now. So one question here before we wrap up. When you reflect on your whole career, and I'm going to go deep on you here a little bit because I always end this on a deep question. But so when you reflect on your whole athletic career and also mental performance career, like what do you think you've learned the most about yourself?
I think what I've learned, it kind of goes back to a similar sentiment I said earlier, but it truly is about showing up and the consistency. And if you can count on yourself to do that, then it's going to evolve into a lot more. And I think a lot of times we take for granted. I mean, we talked about how it's important to be focused and show up, but if you know that you got yourself and that you're going to show up no matter what,
Hmm.
that's really, really powerful mentally. And I think just seeing all the consistency pay off has been on days where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I writing my gratitude, meditating, doing my mobility, like every single day? No one's
Yeah.
watching me, like, things like that. And just finally seeing all the dots connect.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Slight Edge,
Mm-mm.
but it's the slight edge is actually doing a little bit each day for a long time, and that will give you the slight edge. And it's a beautiful book because it talks about like, we see all these things out there, like the 7 pillars of this, the 5 ways to, achieve greatness. All of that stuff is right. It all works. But why does it work for some people and it doesn't work for others?
Mhm.
Right. And it goes to the law of too easy. It's really easy to do and it's really easy not to do. And if you're not doing it consistently a little bit each day for a long time, well, none of these pillars or the 5 ways to greatness is going to work. So the grind of, and I hear Graham in my head, grease the grind with joy, right? But when you're grinding every day with meditation and journaling and all that stuff, you just do it a little bit and you'll see it in a year. You'll see it in
Yeah.
two.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm going through right now. And it feels like magic. And I know it's not magic. It's like, no, this is you, this is everything you did. You showed up every single day and did
Yeah.
this. But what's so interesting is I think we as a society and in sport have such a black and white mindset. It's easier for our brains to compartmentalize and say, I'm either going to eat junk or I'm going to eat really healthy. But it's
Yeah.
like, why can't we reframe that? Doing one deadlift between every meeting, that's going to add up. Like, why can't we see ththings that way? And
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful if we're consistent with that and we don't just write things off as, oh, well, just, I think we can really change if we take advantage and are consistent in little things every day, like you said.
Big time. And I love what you said earlier about showing up. If you want to go anywhere, it's really hard to go from point A to point B if you're not showing up, if you're not at least getting in the car to drive. So it's a huge point. And not only showing up, it's about being vulnerable. And it's not about necessarily being vulnerable with your feelings. It is 100%, but it's also being vulnerable with your performance, being vulnerable with people around you in the environment, just showing up and being
Right.
vulnerable. So
I have a quick question for you. So what's your balance? So a lot of times with runners, the motivation of just getting your shoes on, and getting out there is something that they run into a lot. And something that I've negotiated over the years and I'm still figuring out is that balance between, showing up, but also recognizing the times where you need to rest.
yeah, big
And
time.
wondering what kind of tools you use with your athletes when trying to balance that.
For me, it's, again, it starts with language. So and I heard you say it a little bit. I heard you correct yourself earlier, but I get to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I get to put on my shoes and beat the shit out of my body for an hour, and I get to recover. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we understand stress, our bodies were built to actually be stressed out, but we have to get to a point and have that balance, as you say, to push the limits so we can earn the right to recover. But when we earn the right and we've built awareness around it, we can say again, I get to recover. I get to. And
I,
so using I get to on the front end and the back end of what you're saying, to me, provides the balance of that
yeah,
process.
that's amazing. And I love, because I always reframe the language too with my athletes as well, as I get to put my cleats on right now and play football for a living. That's
Right.
amazing. But reframing on the other end of I get to recover and spend time with my family and I think that's beautiful. And I'm definitely going to use that.
Awesome. So, man, I could talk to you for another hour on this stuff.
I know.
It's awesome. Well, how can they follow you on social media, learn more about your practice, and reach out to you?
Yeah. Growwithchloe@gmail.com. Growwithchloe.com is my website. And my Instagram is growwithchloe. So I keep it simple, but it's GRO and CLO.
Got it. Awesome. Well, Chloe, thank you for being on my show and sharing your journey and your mindset and your energy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was, it's just always great having a conversation with you. So I appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Beautiful.